Very nice. Chris, what do we have this evening?
Oh well, we have this has become one of my very favorites. Is I've had it before here. This is the
This one?
Black Hog Brewery hazy,
Nice.
juicy India Pale Ale. It's very.
It's tasty. It's nice. It's a good one.
I like it a lot.
Very good. Very good. I was gonna take a wild guess that it was that one because you've had it quite a bit lately.
I have.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Well,
Tell the people you're
I'm really excited that I'm finally trying.
Wacko Jacko.
What's that?
Wacko Jacko Pumpkin.
Jacko Pumpkin from Sam Adams here, because my coworker recommended it like last year, maybe even the year before that, and was just saying it was one of her favorite fall traditions with her husband to just have a pumpkin beer on the porch in the fall, and that just sounded delightful. But I just never got myself to get it, and I finally did it now, and it's pleasant. I had a terrible pumpkin beer experience years back, which kind of made me steer clear for like a decade. That's pretty bad.
The terrible pumpkin beer.
A terrible pumpkin beer experience.
Forward to that poem. I think there needs to be a poem about the pumpkin beer incident.
I think there should be. I think, yeah, Chris,
All right.
absolutely.
All right, I want to hear it.
I need to get on it. I've had like a wave of fresh inspiration. I've been focusing so much on sending my manuscript out, that is focusing on some pretty serious and intense matters, which I'm really proud of. But I'm kind of enjoying this wave of inspiration where I'm having a little bit more fun with like mundane and minutia and humor, and I'm excited about this. I'm excited to share some of these poems, but I need to keep them cooking so that they're ready to share sooner rather than later.
The pumpkin ale poem. You get the ferry full of poets.
Very full of poets.
Right? Taking the ferry out to Governor's Island for the poetry festival.
Yes.
Hey, that almost writes itself. I mean, come on.
That's so true. Well, online dating experiences. I have a few brewing. Woo.
Match.com poems.
Say again?
Match.com poems.
Match.com poems. Rom-com, like just I mean, some online dating experiences are just really, really strange. but like full of these little delightful details as well. I think it's going to be a good time. Anyways, right, Chris, so I was celebrating my sister's birthday this weekend, hanging out with mom and dad. Hi, mom and dad, out there in the chat.
Mom and dad are here as always.
Yes. And you had a nice weekend dealing with like home renovation stuff.
Yes. Well, we're just like we're redoing the floors, so we got to get everything the hell out of the downstairs.
The hell.
It's brutal. But it's gonna look nice, so
yeah.
We're gonna stay in a hotel for a night, maybe 2 nights.
Chris, this take this opportunity. Go someplace with like a spa or a pool, or go to Weekend Sun.
There's a pool. It's like unheated, but it's and we'll have the dog. With the dog, it's like the dog friendly hotel, and so we're gonna have a full house, the 3 of us plus the dog.
Oh boy.
And yeah, so but we're gonna tear the place up.
Right. Yeah. No, that's it. That's serious. But that's exciting too. It's always nice to do a little bit of a transform your space, and I'm sure you're looking forward to the fabulous outcome. Is it like opening up your like kitchen, living room area? Is it?
Oh, it's all gonna be the same. Well, we just had the kitchen done, but
Yeah,
it's all an open space, so it's all one
nice.
big. But it's always been that way. But
And you
you have a kid, you got a dog, you're picking up things and dragging them around the room for 12 years or so. You got
it's a big change.
there's been like gladiator battles in it, so
Gladiator battles.
uh,
That is too funny, Chris. Well, I'm excited for you. Early fall is a good time to do things. It's still a bit
I think
warm, yet a little bit crisp, not blazing
yeah.
hot anymore. It's a
So
good
I'll tell
time.
you next week we'll talk about how it turns out.
Yeah. Maybe we can have a little reveal. We've only seen this room of your house, Chris. What is it? What does the rest even look like? Right? We're in this like universe trapped within these little
True.
rectangles. Not
Hey,
as
it's
much as we
all
used to be, but we do need to give our official welcome.
Yes, we do.
Welcome officially to to FUMFA 107. We are so I know every single show we have over 100 is pretty darn exciting to me, Chris. I mean, all of
Yeah.
them are individually wonderful as well. And we have our whole library up, of course, on Facebook and YouTube. But we're so excited to welcome this evening Mary Catherine Harper and Meredith Bergman. They will both be reading with us this evening, and of course, sharing more about their work and themselves in our Q&A. So we're looking forward to that. But Chris, what do we have also coming up in the next few weeks?
Well, next week we usher in October. And for our 108th reading, we're going to have a double whammy here. Matt Cedillo and Tongo Ison Martin. It's going to be amazing.
Awesome.
And then the following week, 9th of October, we've got our old friend, Larry Bloom.
Larry Bloom!
Such a joy. He's got a new book out, which is delightful. And he's going to treat us to some stuff from that, I assume. And we'll also have Brad Davis. And then the following week, we have our in-person open mic.
Yes.
On Friday the 14th at Echo Evolution in South Norwalk. And we've got
come on down, sign up.
Yeah, we've got Charles Rafferty going to come down. Probably, I don't know what he's going to do. He's going to read some poems, maybe some fiction. He's going to might play guitar. I don't know. We got Frank Vera doing comedy. We got Yana Opidi doing some, I don't know, whatever she wants to do. I don't know, fiction, nonfiction, and who else? Do we have anybody else?
Nicole Caruso Garcia, our dear friend, special guest poet on the show multiple times, and she's got an awesome new book out, Oxblood. So I mean, it's a not to be missed night. Even if you don't sign up, you just want to come and hear these incredible people and our signups. You gotta come out. Support Eco-Evolution, grab something at the coffee bar, support your local writer community, and just have a great time. Just wonderful community vibes down there, great fun. So please do make it a point to sign up and or come out to the event. Going to be amazing.
And it's free.
Yeah.
It's free. Walk in, sit down, and enjoy the amazing open mic night with poetry, prose, comedy, music.
What more could you ask for?
Amazing. It's like the Ed Sullivan Show back.
Yeah.
Right.
It's great time. It's a really, really great time. So our social media stuff will be going up for that most likely tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. And anyhow, we got such a great autumn season going on. Chris, this is very, very exciting. Online, in person, it's all happening.
We got a great lineup all the way into December here. Just we don't have enough time to go through it all, and also we have our spooky night on
Spooky night
October It's our open mic. So if anybody has any
Fall open mic
spooky
/ spooky night.
poems or spooky stories, definitely should sign up for that. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's time
absolutely.
to do
It's
some readings here.
Yeah, it's time to welcome our first reader of the evening, Meredith Bergman. Welcome, Meredith.
There she is.
Hello.
How,
Hi.
how are
Nice
you
to
doing
see
this
you.
evening?
Fine, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, we are so excited to read, and we love the ambiance, we love the vibe of background, especially the raven. It is the coolest thing.
It is. It's lit in such a way that raven is like,
It looks very real.
It does. It looks like he's ready to start
Yeah.
flying around the room. It's pretty cool.
Very cool. All right, Meredith, I'm going to share your bio. Meredith Bergman is a sculptor and is a sculptor with public monuments in New York and Boston. In 2020, she won second prize from the Connecticut Poetry Club, and her publications include Barrow Street, Connecticut River Review, Contemporary Poetry Review, Hopkins Review, Hudson Review, Light, Mezzo Camine, New Criterion, Raintown Review, Tri-Quarterly Review, and the anthologies Hot Sonnets, Love Affairs at the Villanelle, alongside We Travel, Contemporary Poets on Autism, and Powwow River Poets Anthology 2. She was poetry editor of American Arts Quarterly from 2006 to 2017. Her chapbook, A Special Education, was published in 2014 by Exot Books. Meredith. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Excited to hear you read, Meredith. Take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Hello. I'd like to start with two poems from my life as a sculptor. First, a sonnet that imagines the daughter I don't have, walking the dog I don't have, and reading the inscriptions on the Boston Women's Memorial, quotations from Abigail Adams, Lucy Stone, and Phyllis Wheatley. For the full texts, please walk your dog to the monument. Public art. A girl, 11, racing down the street, who might be an imaginary daughter, pulled by her lab, a female, plants her feet before a statue whose bronze skirt has caught her big dog's attention. Works of art command our gaze, on average, for 3 seconds. Thought or feeling must work quickly. We can't stand like statues. Life is taxed and overwrought. She doesn't have her gadget, so she scans the stone. Remember, deepen, and surpass. Her dog is eager for a fresher scent. The sculptures, though, are asking if she can imagine she might wield these words. It's fast. This is the moment of the monument. And this next poem follows the form of a 1685 poem by Edward Taylor, a colonial American minister. He wrote about spinning and weaving robes for glory. I work in clay that gets transformed kind of magically into bronze by way of molds and the lost wax process. Lost wax, after Edward Taylor's Huswifery. Make me a portrait of a self more fine, to cast me from myself to final form. Rain down and moisten all the dust that's mine, and make me clay that you may knead and warm. Then pack me round an armature of bone until you find the shape that is my own. Then make the mold to copy me in wax. I am my shape, my clay you may forget, no matter if it dries and falls and cracks. My just impression will survive me yet. Then burn me out so deep inside your oven, my wax is lost, to let my void be proven. This fireproof mold of loving memory made may drink the boiling alloy of your grace, of which I then consist. Your heat then fade and let me harden. Break me out and chase away my imperfections. Make me well, that I, now hollow, ring. Make me your bell. I'm going to read 4 poems from my chapbook, A Special Education. I am an artist. I'm married to a writer and director, and I've worked with him on many film sets, as where this poem is set. We have an adult son who has non-speaking autism, and this first poem was written during what our son now calls the mute period. Symbolic play. We shoot at dawn in Hackensack. The crew are very young and grouchy. Our makeup girl has lost her pack and made her eyes all red and pouchy. Drinking coffee in this waste, I wonder how to lure my boy from his small world of smell and taste to make the world of thought a toy. Fragile jellies in his brain dream without interpretation. Tangled tracks divert the train that longs to pull into a station. Tireless, we pursue the chance that he will love some plot he reads. How can he, without romance, discover syrinx in these weeds? Meanwhile, Phragmites gladly grow in areas disturbed by hands. Their amber waves, unstoried, blow across the spongy meadowlands. We change location, feed the cast, requite the love and fuel the sorrow, manufacture fiction fast. We shoot in Huntington tomorrow. Nursery Rhyme. Some years a single sentence comes, a freak. But I saved everything you ever said from those few early years when you could speak. Beneath each crystal lens, they can be read and understood. I was a careful clerk. I am the reliquary of your words. They would make statues weep, but cannot work the necessary miracle. Unheard, unvoiced, untasted, charming phrases fade, but copied out like prayers, they gain the voice, the lilt of poetry. And weren't they made in flashes of imaginative choice? One snowy afternoon, when talk was cheap, you said to me, "It's raining cats and sheep." One summer, we were trapped in a house that was surrounded overnight by a sudden, ferocious flood, and we were rescued by being towed up into the air in harnesses by a helicopter. The bird in the bathroom. All gray, our bird was small, but not a sparrow. He huddled underneath the pipes. He'd been alone for days, since those who'd let him in had fled the flooded house, but locked each window. Crouched there, uncoaxable as chronic sorrow, our bird was silent and his eye looked dim. I dropped a worn-out dishcloth over him and shook the bundle out onto the meadow. He hopped away. And someday you must follow. From little rooms of therapy, begin to ask yourself what none of us can ask you. One always dreams of more dramatic rescue, like ours from flood. You soar through lashing wind. The chopper sets you gently on your shadow. Well, there was a dramatic rescue. Our son was taught to communicate by pointing to letters after years of our vain attempts in about 20 minutes by a wonderful teacher who then sent us home. Homecoming. After the miracle, the car needs gas, and populations on the freeway pass like insects darting through a flashlight beam to destinations that no longer seem obscure or sad. The family must be fed, although they feel no hunger, and be led to sleep, to wake to what was always there. The dishes must be washed with special care, unbroken, underneath a window that gives on to hills, by morning bland and flat, profound with evening and the falling light. And stories must be told to get them right. After the miracle, the plane is full. Enfolded passengers who feel the pull of earthly plans sit meekly till they're hatched. Some dream of flight. Such dreams cannot be matched to what they know and tell when they're awake. Some dreams become true stories by mistake. After the miracle, there is no rest. It will not fade to fact at our behest. And now I'm going to read a series of poems about my relationship with my mother-in-law, a 45-year-long relationship. This became kind of toxic when we moved in with her in the last few years of her life. But before that, I wrote her a sonnet for her 90th birthday. Exquisite, for a connoisseur on her 90th birthday. If glazes on the vivid paintings dim, embroidered flowers fade away from light, wide windowsills need annually white, and far below an elm has lost a limb. If an ancient cup will chip around the brim, and papers darken as their acids bite, we must defend their gracefulness, must fight lest things absorb our passing and grow grim. But we are ripening. Today your heart, its riches spent on unimagined care, is full of all of us who come and go, of treasures that will never beg repair. And to your face with time has come a glow more delicate than any work of art. My mother-in-law was a collector, and as an artist, I greatly appreciated all the beautiful things that she amassed, including her dishes. Services. I tried to love your mother, but I can't. I dream of smashing dishes. To stay sane, I lock the bathroom door and then I rant and rave and sob. I cannot tell its slant. How to forgive the scorn that caused such pain. I tried to love your mother, but I can't forget the years when her regard was scant, and now we live with her and her disdain. I lock the bathroom door and then I rant at Wedgwood and Limoges, how they supplant the dish that might be loving if served plain. I've tried to love your mothers, but I can't. Her Royal Doulton's lovely, that I grant, but it would shatter first in my campaign. I lock the bathroom door, but hear her rant, and then pretend she didn't and recant. I never chipped her spode, and I maintain I tried to love your mother, but I can't. I'll lock the bathroom door. I'll have my rant. Okay, so here's my rant. Trying to find a frame within which to explore a long toxic relationship, I asked my friend the poet A.E. Stallings if she knew of any terrifying mothers-in-law in Greek or Roman myths, and she immediately said Venus in Cupid and Psyche. In this Roman tale from Apuleius, Venus torments Psyche by assigning her life-threatening labors. Meanwhile, the palace is full of invisible servants and luxurious things. Psyche in Connecticut. At last, she said, you've condescended to call upon your mother-in-law. I'll receive you as a good mother should. Where, she called, are those servants of mine, care and sorrowing? Apuleius, The Tale of the Old Woman, the Golden Ass, translated by Jack Lindsay. Psyche and Venus. Forgive me, this is an old woman's tale, an old wives' tale of mothers made in law and not in nature, of a wife who tried for 40 years to love her lover's mother. Forgive me if you know your Apuleius. His Psyche trickles down, how thin and pale, to Cinderella and Rumpelstiltskin, and the evil stepmother whose feet were fried, who danced her doom in red-hot iron shoes, descends in chic Helene Arpels from Venus. If I move on, enabling me to shed her snakeskin pumps, where do I get the right to focus only on her venom? Strife makes myth. I'll find, as I unpack, ensure that's past its date, her appetite. My thoughts of her come crying to be fed or starved, and sometimes wake me in the night, and then I feel I'm still inside her life for all it's done. I'll warm myself some milk and pour it down the drain, a dwindling white. Psyche revisits the closet of Venus. She gave me cast-offs I was glad to wear because they were so rich and beautiful, although they didn't complement my hair or skin tone. I was young and dutiful and dazzled by her luxury and taste, her makeup, scent, and jewels. I wore work clothes. She'd twist embroidered sashes round her waist over tight girdles. Poetry, not prose. She'd make me watch her dress. Do I look fat? What could I say? She wasn't young or slim, but saw herself as an aristocrat. I kept my falsehoods simple, sweet, and prim. What could I give a queen whose wardrobe's full, who owns so much Chanel and Givenchy? I knit a suit of delicate white wool from rare Greek goats, which she sent back to me for alterations many times. I made a purse for her from seed pearls, and she said my hands were clever. Are my debts not paid? And who will wear these clothes when she is dead? Psyche ponders her labors. My mother-in-law would have her Persian carpets rehemmed at home, rewoven on her floors. I stitched silk thread around the crusts from orgies. She sent me to bad neighborhoods to fetch her gold wool drapes, restyled by sullen men. I searched through gourmet markets for her spices, and oatmeal sorted by the sharpest cut, and water from a gorge high in the Alps, from the center of a violent waterfall, to be served cold and in her finest crystal. She must have one cream only from La Mer. She likes the jars for storing Ambien. For final proof of things unprovable, she'd have her ashes scattered in that valley of alarming sheep, dark birds, and darker water. Meanwhile, I'm frantic with my daughter, Pleasure, who, as a demigod, was never normal, but whose regressions are my greatest heartache. I've harried experts, tested therapies, and would brave any task to find her cure. Psyche remembers Venus in the kitchen. There was nothing we could do together for long. At the stove, I felt her elbow me aside and was astonished. An elbow in my side? I loved to sing. If I began a song, she'd join as a corrective, drowning me out, her wavery soprano like the breath of an immortal mosquito on my neck. To silence her, I made my throat a drought, and still I hear her whine. Mealtimes, the air was ritually thick with flying plates, with trays of goblets, all her appetites. She feels her body's failing isn't fair. It's time to go and fill up her machine. The tube that dangles from a hanging sack shunts vomit-colored liquid to her stomach. She's got another mouth. It seems unclean. I keep it short. I've learned never to trust our conversations twisted into hurt. She'll trap me into truths that clog my heart. With time, dislike can spoil into disgust. Psyche contains herself. We know that love can die, but can the goddess? She ages and her wants become her needs. She wants my youth. She envies nothing else and told me so. She wants her apple juice, her nectar in its little crystal jar. She won't be satisfied with something less organic, cloudy, dark as apple seeds and hard to find. It isn't on the shelf in any of 5 stores. That's no excuse. It pleases her to know I've traveled far. I think I may say no to some requests. I'll get the nurse. I can't restring those beads right now. Why don't you buy that gift yourself? I'm trying to be so much less of use. Avoiding her, however, feels bizarre. At night, alone, I overhear distress. She has become her habits as she fades. She rails at Cupid, then she takes her pills. She wants to win. She'll never make a truce with aging, and she wants to write a memoir. Psyche visits Venus in the ICU. I couldn't put my anger into action. This year, my pokeweed, bloodroot, hemlock, yew were weed-whacked by a palace gardener. Sharp implements began to disappear. She sickened by herself eventually. Yet, when I saw her wedged into that shell of a bed with giant pillows of doves down, clamped in the cephalopod of aqua tubing, her hands bowed up in clouds of polyester, and buoyed by the piping of the invisible servants, I lost my dream of looming over her, possessed with the arms of an unknown god or goddess, lifting the chair with its porphyry upholstery and smashing it down upon her porous bones, leaving her a pulp in the metal frame. And when I crept up near the monitors and placed my hand just lightly on her forehead, I was invisible. Her eyes still closed, she shook me off. She shook her head 2 times. You know she's very strong, the nurse said later. The death of Venus. 1 century. How could it be enough? The hospice was a farce. To save her money, to keep the invisible servants coming, though I sometimes heard them in the kitchen crying. She makes me feel so low, one of them said. The hospice people said it might be weeks, and we thought years. She only took 3 days, a thing incongruous and unexpected. He called me from downstairs by phone to say, I think my mother just died, and she was dead. The helpers had sent extra help that morning, and they remained, gathering us around her bed to pray for her immortal soul. We spoke of all the good she'd done for patients, of her escape from Hitler, how she built a safe, aesthetic home, a lifelong marriage, some loving friendships, her great love of music. We stood around her corpse and sent our thoughts to nothing that exists or that can answer. No chariot, archaic or baroque, descended. Cupid and Psyche sell the house. The timing's right. Why hear her in my head, where I still crouch among the cinders, face and body aged, mind racked with infant aches? She died 2 years ago. Her voice is past. We stored her ashes in the secret space. We're going to leave her here. To leave instead, to put the palace on the market, sell her statues, bring her shoes to some goodwill, and move out of the myth. We'll bring the urn. We'll leave behind the giant scallop shell. I feared she would outlast me. I misread the tales and stories. They don't end in tears. The young move on. Their happiness is theirs. But is forgiveness once upon a time, or must it be a daily rite for years? I pray I may forget the things she said, the ways in which I tried to fit her clothes. I pray that I may wear one inky cloak that's edged with sable, infinitely soft, and feel that it is something that I chose. Okay, I'm working on another completely different series of poems set in an imaginary museum inspired by 2 museums in New York City, the Metropolitan Museum and the Museum of Sex. And I'm just going to read it. I'll end with a few poems from that series. Gallery by Gallery, The Dark Ages. I had a childhood without nudity, male nudity. My father always clothed, my brother, lesser copy, unexposed. I never saw a photograph that helped. In a darkened junior high school health class once, we were shown slides of private parts on screen, discolored and distorted by disease. There seemed to be no beauty in the unknown. In high school, more than ready for a dawning, I roamed museums. All the glistening statues were babies, or were sporting leaves or feathers. Even in art class, life drawing meant drawing bodies encased in nylon. I refused. I felt art owed me all the altogether. Prince, and this is a pun, this is not the frog prince, this is Prints. This image to be viewed upon request portrays the first boy that I saw undressed. We once went skinny dipping after school, and he fell deep so fast, my plunging fool. He'd probably never seen a naked girl. That's how he spun for years, caught in the whirl of wanting me, but wanting more, to suffer. I slept with him in time. Our kisses, rougher, still held no magic. No one was transformed. Then I met someone brighter. Here, performed against dark leaves above the diving board, his sudden leaping after pausing there, his white legs kicking through the whitening air. He fades from daylight, even safely stored. Modern and contemporary. The sleep of reason spawns a lot of art. The nightmares of surrealists gave way to ready-mades, consumer goods, and look, his bedroom on display. The long white walls, the huge white rumpled bed, a kind of dais, evoking dreams in which I show up naked or wearing socks, whatever makes it worse. I felt humiliated in this bed in college. Suddenly he'd want a threesome or prostitutes to teach me or the dean. He had the dean. I used to have the nightmares. On long-term loan from an obscure collection, the bed lies here, a deftly ruined concept, a layer of rubble on a podium. And I will end with a much more cheerful poem. Period furniture, the royal bedchamber. Nobody thinks that this is really art. It's just the stuff that dreams are made on, hung with rich, explicit tapestries that chart a dozen metamorphoses. Among these flagrant scenes, intended to impart a history for acts that all our young discover, none alludes to what the heart acquires. The role of marriage is unsung. But beds are made. This took us many years. The heyday in the blood seems nearly tame, yet every spring supports and reaffirms our passion's heft. The craft, the art that clears a brow, ignites a laugh, can still inflame this antique bed of wood made frail by worms. Thank you.
Woo! Meredith! Oh my goodness, what a richness! Oh, what powerful, powerful poems. We heard such incredible use of form here, Chris. All of this imagery coming at us. We're seeing the mother-in-law relationship, the whole progress of that. Woo! Very powerful and painful, and at the same time, just so beautifully woven into metaphor with the myth, you know, and then so delightful to hear these sexy poems at the end. We love a sexy poem.
There are more.
Meredith, awesome. Chris, just awesome poems.
Oh, fantastic! And the breadth of
Yes.
scope from the sculpture poems, and we have to talk about sculpture.
Yes, we do.
Q&A. I'm so fascinated by that, and filmmaking, and your family poems, and then your mother-in-law is just like this whole suite of mother-in-law poems, which I'm sure people can who are not even maybe not that familiar with myths, but can completely relate to.
Totally.
to
Yeah,
the-
or just trying so hard to please like a kind of a narcissistic or a colder family member. I think we've all been in these kinds of moments, which is so eager to have a good relationship and to be kind of loved and respected in that context, and just kind of it always being so elusive, yet we admire this person, and their spirit lives with us even after they're gone. Just really powerful poems, a breadth, like you said, Chris, of subject matter and also of forms, which makes me so excited. So many questions for the Q&A already.
We talk about some form there, you poets.
Yes. Super awesome, Meredith. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, Chris, what a way to kick off the evening. Really incredible reading from Meredith Bergman there. We have our second reader of the evening coming up. We're excited to introduce to you Mary Catherine Harper. Welcome, Mary Catherine.
Hello.
How are you doing this evening?
Just great. That really was wonderful. Really, truly amazing poems, Meredith. Yes.
Yeah, just awesome. Chris, would you do the honors of introducing Mary Catherine?
I would be more than happy to. Mary Catherine Harper, an Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award winner and two-time recipient of the Gwendolyn Brooks Poetry Prize.
Awesome.
Was selected as the 2019 Ohio Arts Council Poetry Resident at the Fine Arts Work Center of Cape Cod. Her poetry has appeared in numerous journals, including Comstock Review, Cold Mountain Review, Pudding Magazine, New England Review, Slab, Mid-America, Print-Oriented Bastards. I love that. And
Great name.
she organizes the yearly Swamp Fire Retreat. You can find that at swampfire.org for artists and writers in Angola, Indiana. Her Some Gods Don't Need Saints chapbook was published in 2016, and The Found Object Imagines a Life, New and Selected Poems, is forthcoming from our friends at Cornerstone Press.
Whoop, whoop.
You can find her at Mary Catherine Harper, that's Catherine with a C, catherineharper.org for more info. Take it away, Michael.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. And I want to actually say that the Swamp Fire activities, they're co-sponsored. The person who began Swamp Fire is Dawn Burns, and I actually think she's in the audience tonight. I'm very excited to be reading from, yes, my new collection. And I'll just start there. I hope that all of you can experience these poems in a way that's meaningful to you. Not specifically trying to get inside my head, but I want to get inside your head. To me, all poems are in some ways found objects, thus the title of the collection, The Found Object Imagines a Life. In the title poem, an object speaks to us. And so I'll just read the first half of that particular poem. The found object imagines a life. Lying here on the sidewalk, I will wait for someone like you to stop. Pick me up. Something round-edged, soft in the middle, an invitation to press your index finger into me. Whoa. Just so. I'll give under your touch, seduce you with warmth, the way the spring sun feels on your exposed arms, your throat, your lips, your eyelids, as you step into the street of cars, enthralled. I won't release you, no found object ever does, even though I'll feel sympathy for the inconvenience I cause your collapsed lung, your cracked femur. You'll live. You'll spend the rest of your life confounded, yet fascinated by the persistence of me, my promise beckoning. Isn't that how poems are? Poems call to us. They welcome us into their arms, like trees do. There's a poem called Tree. I see you watching over all the earth. I know you wait, noticing everything, even me. As I step closer, the skin of your limbs ripples. I move closer still, my arms cooled by your shadow. I feel your shadow, anticipating. I am not imagining this invitation. Your rough bark body welcoming my arms. Your shadow, mine. I've spent a lot of time among the shadows of trees, including trees of the Rocky Mountains. So here's a group of poems inspired by mountain hikes. And I actually think I'm the shadow in this particular poem. It's called Turning to Stone. It was while hiking Lizard Head in the San Juan Range, we already above timberline and skirting a talus field below the vertical summit, coming around a large angular rock, that I saw it, a common yellow-bellied rodent in the scree, a marmot. As I stopped to photograph it, expecting it to crouch, to scurry to a burrow, it remained fully upright on its hind legs, puffing its chest fur out as if to say, "Here I am. What's it to you?" My thoughts tumbled. Surely it heard the whistle of colony mates, safe from view, camouflaged by tawny brown coats and white trim. What instinct must be at work, that body drawn upright to enlarge itself, that expanse of chest and arm muscle, that bodybuilder's frontal pose? Surely it intuited me as a predator, the sudden appearance of my mane, my long red hair like the foxes and coyotes in the area. And yet it was fearless, staring me down. A good response given its low position on the food chain. Forgetting the camera in my hand, I was enthralled, studying its face like a believer, peering into a stone whose cracks and shadows look eerily like a saint's eyes, begging for faith. The only response left to one already turned to stone. And then there's Persephone, who lives in stone, in the underworld of Hades 6 months of every year. I'm going to read that poem. It's called Spelunking for Persephone. It's the title of one of the sections of my collection, a whole selection or whole section on Persephone. This poem is written for and written to Katie St. Clair, artist and spelunker. I can't imagine myself wedged between them, this body of hips and back pressed against stone to make me narrow enough to slide down into the artery of bedrock, hoping for an opening. Unlike you, I only enter stone through words. This body unaccustomed to the resculpture of lungs, the discipline of resizing the chest, as you phrase it, breathing so slowed that oxygen hardly matters. Whose chilled torso sweats from the exertion? Yours or hers? Made of summer and winter at the same time. Hers, a body both almost alive and somewhat dead. Her liminal state, to be dreaded, to be wholly desired. The other voice. It is said the goal is not to climb the highest peak, but to master fear, to find one's muscles in the most jagged spot, the most exposed, the climb mere practice for living through the next earthquake. Time and space contract there, the expanse of geology reduced to a topo map, the mountain reduced to a body grown for the sake of discipline. But might the goal also be to hear the other voice there, the steady beat of the stone, the pulse of magma inching upward, to understand, finally, the purpose of the planet left to creep at its own pace, the fault line's own slow time. Never having to feel gratitude. It was to be, simply to be, paradise. We never having to feel gratitude for the difference made by a cloud's shadow crossing the lake you and I happened to be swimming in. We never outside peering in to each other's eyes. You never being separate from me. We never needing to be something to one another. We never needing to need anything. Never needing to seize love. This mountain-based poem is full of shadows of the past. What this must mean. I know what this must mean. Only now noticing our shoes mismatched all these years. Your polished leather dress shoes, my high-top hikers caked with dried mud. I know what this must mean, picturing you as water shed through cupped hands, me leaving the proverbial water hole, headed for my 40 days in the desert. I know what this must mean, turning myself into a survivalist, armed with the folded photograph of one left behind because he could not stomach the sandy taste of dehydrated love. Love can be the most shadowy thing of all, and the poems in my collection are dedicated to the memory of my mother, Barbara, who taught me to honor the stories of all shadows. So this is a poem for and about her. Survivor's story. I don't know any of you others before me who stumbled from the old world after your forced conversion, after the ruin of your army trampled crops, after the potato blight wasted our family. Only the rattle of a New World diamondback just before being hacked into pieces in a garden, weeded up with thorns and devil's horns, a sticker patch my mother could never eradicate. My story hasn't the ferocity of a hounding law and futile attempts to escape it. No scenes of momentary relief for hungry lips, no rags of clothing distributed to worn, thin bodies dragging around their equally tired souls. My story pales. Nevertheless, here she is, my mother, heavy with survivor's guilt. Yes, arriving at the end of blight and rape and prayer that could get you killed. Yes, but a woman strong-willed as venom, with enough bite to her to never beg for food her several hungers long, to never willingly bare her nether parts, let alone her soul, to anyone at any time ever again. Here, bearing fangs as long-reaching as a garden hoe when the rattlesnake coils, aiming for me. Sonic booms. Some families attach name tags to every conversation, every pause in conversation, every tone shift, every hand gesture, as if naming could make it easier to control each other's sound from the outside in. Some families expel verbs and clusters of verbs, omitting as many as possible because verbs cause so much touch among the world's objects, because verbs require so much breath to blow them over. Some families are by nature, by breeding, or both, innervated by the whisper that bodies make tiptoeing through rooms, as if any elliptical paths crossing would result in collision, as if any touch would produce sonic booms. You can tell those are family poems, and the next few poems that I found, those found objects, the next few poems that I've experienced are also family poems. I don't know if they're like your family experiences, but here goes. Sandpaper in the toolbox. One of my daughters declares it's just the human condition, the puzzling dysfunction of a family meant to cocoon us through birth and baptism, through anniversary and death. This vortex of urgent calls packing us together in the small space of the old farmhouse, ostensibly for warmth and company when a blizzard takes out the power lines. Every family storm blows us back to the gritty sensitivities we thought we'd bound tight in layers of bubble wrap and secreted in the drawers and closets of our childhood. Unexpectedly exposed and raw, we are baffled up by that sharp urge to rub each other the wrong way once again, forgetting our vow of maturity, failing to leave the coarse grit sandpaper in the toolbox where it belongs. We, the aging six of a sensible carpenter, still compelled to hammer out complaints, wasting our good company, waiting for power to be restored. Train stories. I mimic my father's hospitality to strangers, tell nostalgic stories of long ago farm life to fellow passengers, cocoon close on a train bound for a place made to scatter us. The certainty of that future endpoint, the conviction of what the past should mean, even the statically charged present given up to the liminality of this incidental community. Each story of what was never quite true jostling us toward familiarity, making the squeeze of space, the narrowness of time, the differences among strangers inconsequential. Train travel forces us to resize our lives before disembarking. We gather our possessions, stuff our rucksacks. No, we can't leave the heavy truth of the past behind on warm seats. Heaven's been open. The day we buried his ashes, our brother's karma found us, bringing with it that funnel cloud, wide enough to swath through the house, barn, outbuildings of the home that owns us. Nature's test out of the southwest aimed straight at the five of us standing in a row on the sidewalk, that arm of sky kissing ground as if to taunt us with the threat of embrace. The alarm of a family craving family, winding siblings tight for death, even as we entreat each other to scatter. Our brother's stormy mind rotating, not low enough to lift the roof, just close enough to prime a vacuum, to empty our lungs of yearning. And I swear it was then I saw heaven spin open, as if to say he loves us, like wind loving loose shingles just before it sends the hail pelting down. By the way, this actually happened the day of my brother's funeral. And this, of course, was out in Southwest Kansas in Tornado Alley. Feuding clans. Violence begets violence until the thick saturation of it blooms out of its borders. An unexpected moment. Call it blessing, call it grace, call it love, where all the trauma cradled down in the gut of generations is thrown away as naturally as children wandering into the demilitarized zone between innocence and experience. Children throw their hearts across the border and into the fray, fearless, headlong, even as they swallow the horror of it, trusting that every terrible detail of the story will be written out loud, then thrown away forever. And back to my mother. Beets. After staining my hands with their peelings, after thin slicing them, revealing their ruby gleam, after dropping them in a pot of boiling water, along with islands of peppers, potatoes, carrots, and cabbage, to be churned into a wine-stained sea, after setting the table with my mother's chipped china from the dirty 30s, after stirring through the hour it takes before I ladle soup into the bowls, dyeing the red roses printed there, an even darker shade, almost too dark for my family's comfort, dark as blood pudding. Only then does she limp across the threshold between her grave and my kitchen, in her white nurse's shoes, as splattered with blood as when she last butchered chickens 6 summers ago. Only then does she step in to dip her finger in the borscht and lick with satisfaction. Only then to red lip her approval. Only then to wipe her stained hand on my apron, to remind me that while this might not be my favorite soup, nor red my favorite color, she's still my mother, and they're her favorites. With that, I call my daughters to dinner. And now for the final poem. It was written in a tent near a tree, of course. Potter's Retreat, Poet's Ground. By the way, this is a poem that was written at swamp fire. The lure of swamp fire and promise of a land edging west of every god, where the fat heads of winter wheat sit on stalks grown thick enough to withstand any late spring hailstorm of Ohio, where I pitch my tent on Indiana ground swept clean of stones, and hear the echo that rain makes when it hits a shale outcrop, where the offspring of last summer's dragonflies emerge by the dozens to guide would-be potters up a hill to a beehive kiln, where words that buzz loose in the mouth are given over to the clay that made the world, where the wood burning in the campfire reminds me of why I want to live forever. Thank you.
Woo! Mary Catherine! I love those last lines. Why I want to live forever. Woo!
Yes.
Fantastic. What a total richness of imagery and metaphor here. Excuse me. These beautiful, very personal moments and reflections in these different relationships, these images of pain, these images of love and sort of the dark side of love, and then a bit about poetry and your the Midwest landscape going on. We love it.
Are you still in Ohio?
I am in Ohio. I was born and raised in Kansas, and I've lived in Oklahoma and Texas and Colorado and Montana. But now I'm here in Ohio, and I love it here too.
Where in Ohio are you?
Do you know where Toledo is?
Yes, I do. I'm from Canton, Ohio. That's where I was
Oh,
born and raised. So
okay. Well, I'm in
Hi,
Defiance, Ohio, which is at the confluence of the Auglaize and Maumee. And so it's just 45 miles west of Toledo, for those who don't know where that is.
okay. Yeah, Northwest.
That
Yep.
is awesome. Love it. Love it.
Okay.
Yes, Buckeye. That's so great. Mary Catherine, thank you so much. Just absolutely, absolutely lovely poems. And let's get going with our Q&A. First of all, let's give another round of applause for both of our readers this evening, Meredith Bergman and Mary Catherine Harper. Woo! Just awesome. And you know, we do our best to make thoughtful combinations on our feature evenings, and you know, just a beautiful serendipitous connection this evening as well, delving into just the kind of the darkness, the beauty, the complexity of these relationships, incredible richness of imagery and metaphor, in all of that was really dwelling, you know, deeply in these images and in these relationships, and so much was resonating with me in such a beautiful, quiet, and reflective way. It was really awesome.
Lots of family and some mythology thrown in there for good measure. And
Yes.
amazing.
We love it. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's kick off the Q&A. Audience, get those questions in the chat. We are going to ask you our famous first question, which is a huge question. Chris, take it away.
All right. Well, we'll start with Meredith since she went first, and I'm interested in the difference. Well, the question is, well, how has writing changed your life? And now you're also a sculptor, a very successful sculptor, and so I'm also kind of interested in if you know the difference and the similarities of how these two art forms are different and how they are the same and how they've changed your life in whatever way they have.
Well, I wrote poetry, as a child, and then I stopped. And it was only after our son was diagnosed with autism and I spent 2 years crying that I began to think maybe this is clumped together grief and I need to sort it out. And therapy did not help. And I took a poetry class and discovered that by writing poems, I could, in a sense, make objects, which is what I do, and parse all this stew of emotions and make something out of each one. But also, writing in form leads you away from simply venting or simply expressing your feelings. You have to think and get involved in the wordplay, and it's wonderfully liberating because you end up going somewhere completely unexpected, and that can lift you out of whatever state you're in. So I think sculpture is what I do, but I think in a sense poetry is how I think.
Oh, I love that, Meredith. That is awesome. That is really, really awesome. And I love hearing people say this. The immediate impression for many people out there is that form is so restricting and scary, but it's like, well, of course there are aspects that we need to adhere to. We have to learn about, we want to do it well. And then there's an editing process, etc. But that how the form sort of within its confines pushes us to make these word choices that aren't necessarily immediate, but might lead us to greater creativity, that there's an interesting road it takes us on that can be sort of healing and its own additional layer to kind of creating that object that is now separate from us, right? I think that's such a beautiful expression of how that, writing poems, particularly in form, was really healing for you and helped you to process in that way. That's really, really cool, Meredith.
Okay. That's great. So, Mary Catherine, how has writing changed your life?
Well, I think I want to piggyback on that when we write, it's like we have to stop whatever we're feeling.
Yeah.
To grasp something that speaks to it truly, yes, but also takes us deeper into the complexities of living. It's through writing poetry for me. It's through that process that I look at because I'm this really, I am a high-strung, high-torqued person, right? And but I have to take those emotions I feel, sometimes the knee-jerk reactions to things, and go, well, wait a minute, what else is in here? Or dealing with human beings and dealing with human relationships. Wait a minute. It's not just my story that matters.
Right.
It's somebody else's story that matters. You can probably tell from my poems that there was a lot of violence in my family. And my mother struggled to control herself, but oh my God, she worked at it. She loved us fiercely. And to be able to, and I've done this elsewhere in a set of memoirs, but to get inside the head of another human being, or to attempt it, to imagine what it was like to be not my mother, but to be a girl in a different time, in a different place, and struggling and having to deal with some really horrible things. The way in which that it does stop us, it causes us to think beyond ourselves, get outside of our stories, into other people's stories. Sometimes we have to imagine them. We don't know what they actually are or all of the details of them. And sometimes we can ask others, what is your story? Let me hear it. This really helped me do that in life.
Well, you know, the way you introduced your reading too, signals that, you know, how you were, you made a point of saying, yes, these are my poems, but these poems are going to affect you in your way, and I want to get inside your head. You say,
I love that.
So that's obviously super important.
And that they're these like found objects, that they're something maybe that you're creating, but they're that also, you know, kind of exist, you know, in the world, and that are not just for me, right? They are for everyone. There's something that you find, that you consider, that becomes a part of you. And I love that. It's so so beautiful how both of you touched on this process of like, this is from me and I formed it, but in the process of creating it, I've you know, I've gone beyond just venting my feelings, which is certainly one thing you can do in poetry, but that it sort of becomes something else. It becomes a way of processing, a way of understanding others, a way of kind of, you know, almost ending up in a different place where you started, and to have that be resonant with other people, and have it be in a way healing and very reflective for them as well. That's such a powerful thing about poetry.
All these poems and Meredith's poems about her mother-in-law. I mean, you know, I mean, we can joke about mother-in-laws. There's a million mother-in-law jokes, but you know, I grew up in a family with, you know, with my grandmother in the house my whole childhood. So there was, you know, there was a mother-in-law in the house, and it was intense, you know. So
But writing poems about these things enables you also to have fun with them.
Yes.
To lie, or at least to exaggerate, or to find things that should have been true but unfortunately weren't. You know, you can mix a lot of fiction into the poetry. But I also love the chance to participate in this greater thing, which is literature or poetry.
Yes.
So I write poems in competition with dead poets. I steal it. It enables you to participate in something so much larger than yourself.
Yes.
And that's a great joy.
That is so cool. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Meredith. It's so wonderful to hear these different wonderful references and quotes, to see how much you are in this conversation of, not only kind of sharing your piece, but in response and in reference to, and you are part of this bigger community, both contemporary and, far beyond that. I am so curious to ask, how did you get into form? What informs your form choices? I would love to hear more.
Well, the first class that I took back in 2003 was with Charles Martin at the 92nd Street Y. And he was teaching form, even with free verse. He talked about how you have to create a metrical contract with the reader, so they know where they are, they can grasp it as poetry. He believed that poetry was something to be sung or heard in your head in a way that prose on the page doesn't offer. And I just kept going in that direction because, again, it was defined. So I knew if it was a sonnet, I had 14 lines and then I was out. And no matter how painful the subject or how funny the subject or whatever, I had to kind of constrain it in that way.
Yeah, that is so cool. The freedom of form, the freedom of that constraint. I love that. I really love that. And I, as I look at your bio, I see in there Mezzo Cammin, Raintown Review. These are really awesome, publications that, journals that that are typically about form. And my dear mentor, Dr. Kim Bridgeford,
I worked with Kim. I was on the board of Poetry by the Sea for a while.
No!
I loved her very much.
What
you were for 15 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Meredith, that is awesome. We need to talk more after this show. She was my beloved mentor.
She was stalwart and had so much fun with form. So inventive. I mean, part of the fun is rupturing it, disobeying it, flouting it, and making up your own. It's kind of like I'm not athletic, so this is like my form of tennis or something where I try to be athletic.
I love it. Well, and you extremely nimble you are in these forms, and with your chosen words and kind of the richness of these images and stories and allusions to the myth and the metaphor from the myth. It's just really, really, really excellently well done. We've had so many guests here, from from our world that is connected to Kim, Poetry by the Sea, Fairfield University Master of Fine Arts. She was was there, worked with me there. Just wonderful. Like Anna Evans, we've had on here. It was so great to hear you mention A.E. Stallings. We haven't had A.E. Stallings. That'd be amazing. But that is so great. So great, Meredith. Mary Catherine, passing it over to you. What are your thoughts when approaching form or how you're going to what shape the poem is ultimately going to take? Also, Meredith mentioned kind of the this metric contract, I think is what you said, from that class. How are you thinking about making choices with form and rhythm, and how lyrical something is?
The constraints of form, on the one hand, it could feel like it holds you down, it tightens you, but there is that kind of freedom in it. In this particular collection, I only have one sestina in there, but I have pantoums, and there's a villanelle or two in there. And then there are a few that have call it the surface structure of haiku, verses that simply have the syllabics, and then some that are true haiku. And ever since it was actually before COVID hit, it was, and pardon me for saying something political, it was January 6th. That January 6th. that day I started writing haiku, and I haven't stopped. It's like a haiku a day, and
Hey.
it's one of those very, very strange things that I find with form, and specifically these days I'm so obsessed with haiku. But in terms of the rhythm of them, I see so little in the world of poetry that deals with rhythm these days. And of course I could hear it in Meredith's work, that attention to rhythm, the attention to music, because finally poetry is music. It's not an essay. It's not a meaning. It's an experience. We don't go to rock concerts or the symphony hall and go into the building or wherever it's held and say, now, what is this going to mean? What is
Right.
no. We go in and we say, how will I be moved? What experience will I have? And I think that when we're dealing specifically with form, we're focusing on form, we are linked into that part of the human, that deep part of the human, that is the musical part of the human. I think you just have to, or you don't get the form right. You know, when we talk about form, we're really talking about formal form, right?
Right.
All language has form. But when we're dealing with formal structures, those genres or subgenres, we are dealing with the music inside of the. And I love that. I love that about poetry. So that's
absolutely.
Yes, we've been very fortunate to have like a lot of performance poets on here who are not as maybe concerned or aiming for putting books out or whatever, although they do that as well. But they're like performance poets, and it is so musical, and it may not be iambic pentameter or anything, but it's like
they're devising their their own rhythm in context with the words and the theme and how they're performing it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we got a couple of questions here.
We have a wonderful long question from Don Burns, one of our other guests from several weeks back. Hey, Don.
I did the wrong one. It's because it's a short one.
Oh, apologies. Sorry, Amy. Go ahead, Chris.
No, this came earlier, so I want to get to this one. For Meredith, can you speak to the relationship between classic forms and writing about autism?
Ooh, great question. Wow.
Well, it certainly helped me to write about autism when I first wrote the poems in my chapbook when I was younger and my son was a little boy. Yeah. He's 26 now, so it's been a while. I've been at this for a while. I think the relationship is one that can be made, but I don't think there's any particular relationship. Because it's so important to have structure and to seek organization. That's the word we use a lot in autism, that someone, when they are in their body and peaceful, they are organized. And when they're flailing about and stimming and stuff, they're disorganized. So in that sense, the more organization, the better, the truer and the realer and the more related to other people and the more present.
Right.
But for me, it was really about knowing what the thing was that I was making. I was able to fulfill a form, and then I knew I was done until I started inventing my own. But
hey, that's awesome.
Right. Well, that makes perfect sense.
Oh, thank you so much, Meredith.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. That's a fantastic question. We have a big Paragraph from Don Burns. We got two of them. Wait, Don Burns, we just love it. We're so glad that you're here. Don was our guest a bunch of weeks back, and this is ultimately a question for both. But she says here, for Merely Catherine, what strikes me in hearing you read tonight is the way in which your poetry over the years I've known you has deepened and grown, transforming pain and the complexities of life and relationships into art, never reducing them, but letting them be complex. And it seems you just confirmed this. So now I'll frame a question. How has the poem about your brother's funeral maybe changed meaning for you over time, deepened your own understanding of that moment? And do your poems and your understanding of them and of yourself and others change over time, or once written, or are they static? So, and ultimately, we'll rephrase that for you, Meredith. But Mary Catherine, dive in.
Right. That's a good question for both of us. I know mine's in particular about my brother's funeral and that event, and the five of us standing on that sidewalk. And there are 6 siblings in our family. One couldn't be there. So there were 4 of us kids, grown kids, standing on the sidewalk, and our mother was standing there on the sidewalk and watching the funnel cloud come at us, which is what you do in Southwest Kansas, because you don't even necessarily go inside or into a basement or into shelter until you're pretty sure it's actually going to set down. And that particular tornado did set down about, half a mile away. We found out later at my brother's place, not the one who had died, but my other brother. And it actually did do some damage to a roof there, but it started to go back up into the sky and missed us. So we didn't have to go inside until the very last moment. And we always like that. It's fun to watch funnel clouds come along.
This is terrifying, Mary Catherine.
So there's that. No, I've actually been in tornadoes. But anyway, and I wouldn't consider that one being in a tornado. But the question, so I have to frame it in terms of this is natural phenomenon. Yeah. And the way in which I was seeing my brother, I knew that I would miss him horribly, and I was missing him horribly. Yeah. But in some ways, he was like a force of nature, just like our mother was a force of nature. And these people, these two, they clashed horribly. They fought terribly. They just could not get along, and it was so frustrating for me at times. But that poem isn't the same now as it was then. And in part, it was writing that poem that led me to start thinking about my sisters and how my brother had abused my sisters. And that's in a memoir. And I've talked with my sisters about it. And so it's okay for me to say that. But it led me actually to think more deeply about them. So yes, poems change over time. They change us. Right. They set something in motion sometimes, and this set a whole set of memoirs in motion, because it started out about him and the nature of him, but it turned into so much more about other family members and being able to sit down and talk with them and ask them questions that before that time I was very afraid to ask. Wow. So it was very powerful for me to write the poem and to keep coming back to it. And it has been revised, like, I don't know, every poem gets revised, 7 times or something. So
at least.
Not least, right. So I hope that answers your question, dear Dawn.
Yes. So such a powerful answer. I think that is so true. I've definitely had that experience about how, over time my own poem sort of speaks to me and changes me, and things shift around with it a little bit. I think that speaks to its like authenticity and sort of testifying to something that is very real and very palpable. John says thank you. But Meredith, real quick, to pass it over very quickly to you before our last question, do your poems or your understandings of them change over time, or do they stay the same?
Yes, sure. There are ones that I am never satisfied with, because I actually wanted to say something else. And there are others. I think the poem about homecoming, where we were just in this state of shock, still chokes me up, because that I still don't understand. But it's about expecting the worst and being shocked into the best.
Right.
And that's just such a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
So that remains powerful for me. The others quiet down after a while. The pain, is healed more.
Absolutely. That's awesome. It is time for our famous last double question. It's been so incredible to hear from both of you this evening, and to have you answer our questions and learn more about you and your poems at such a richness that we've been dwelling in. But we have one more double question for you. Chris, take it away.
Sure. Let's start with Mary Catherine this time. It's just a pearl of wisdom, Mary Catherine. A pearl of wisdom for the writers out there. Most of the people watching here are tend to be writers. Sometimes they're youngsters. They don't have a book out there or whatever. They're still figuring it out. Sometimes they're not youngsters and they're still figuring it out, as we all are. So any pearl of wisdom you can offer that you've learned over the years would be helpful, and a book recommendation.
Now that's interesting on the book recommendation, because I'll just start with that one, because usually what I recommend is what I just read. You know how that is.
Fresh.
There's this fellow, Jeffrey Gregg. I read a lot of nonfiction, and I read a lot in the sciences, evolutionary biology, things like that. I love that stuff. And I think his book, If Nietzsche Were a Narwhal, Narwhal, that's a hard word for me to say. If Nietzsche Were a Narwhal, by Jeffrey Gregg, is something that I think all human beings need to read.
I love that.
Because it's so very much about what it means to be human. We think we're so wonderful and so special. And he does this all with great humor, talking about his chickens. But there's so much more to the other animals on this planet. And he is a cognitive scientist, but he doesn't study the human mind. He studies the mind of dolphins.
Wow.
And there's just so much that we might need to contemplate about our environment. And by the way, in my collection, I have a whole section. I actually have a whole book of poems on the environment and the problem of anthropomorphizing animals and taking them as representatives of us, and just how rude that is. But I that's who I'd say to read. And in terms of advice, I know often advice is given just to read. But at this particular moment in my life, I think I want to say to poets, dance, dance, dance.
Woo!
Just dance, move. And as you move, think of the poem that will come out that fits the motion.
Love it.
I love that.
Move the body, just dance. So that's all I have.
I love it, Mary Catherine. That is such
Lovely.
great advice.
The title of a book about writing, just dance, dance, dance.
Yes.
All right, Meredith.
Oh boy. I'm in the middle of Blood Dazzler by Patricia Smith, which is about Hurricane Katrina. It's not a new book, but it is so powerful. It's in so many voices, including the voice of the hurricane, which makes me hope that, Mary Catherine, you'll write in the voice of a tornado.
Yeah.
But it's a marvelous, harrowing book. I haven't quite finished it. And I just read a wonderful novel by Susanna Clark. It's new, called Piranesi.
Yes.
Set in a labyrinth, and it's about the perils of mysticism, I guess you might say, trying to get to alternative worlds. But it's very well done.
Cool.
Yes,
I'm
it
finally
is.
reading novels again, which I didn't for a few years because we were moving house and just
Yeah.
Right.
Advice. Oh boy. Read and then fight back.
I love that.
If you read something that you feel that you could do that, do it, or parody it, or take it apart, or steal from it. But
Right.
don't respect too much what's been written already.
Get in the conversation. Get in the ring with it. Fight with it. I like the way you said that. Like, participate, right? Get involved. I love that, Meredith. That's great advice.
I often read stuff and it's like it's good, and it's like it could be better, and maybe I could do it better. I don't know. It's like sometimes that happens. It's like you really want it to be, better, or maybe it's great and you still want to get in there, but sometimes it's just like not quite there.
Yeah.
Or even if you feel I could never do anything like that, maybe it suggests something different that you could do.
Right.
And that can be wonderful.
Right. That reading and engaging with others writing and others work is a call to participate in your own way. I love that. Absolutely. I always feel inspired whenever I'm reading, even if it's something so different, or maybe especially if it's something so different than what I do. It's like, I want to engage with that too. I want to. It inspires me to get going as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Could I ask, Meredith?
Yeah.
Have you responded to Piranesi? I'm trying to, but I'm having just trouble getting my head around what to say. Have you done that?
No, I just finished it. I'm
okay.
absorbing it.
Yeah,
Just marinating.
Right.
Yeah.
I just love that. Both of once again, thank you so much, Meredith Bergman and Mary Catherine Harper. Such a pleasure to hear you read this evening. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us.
And Katie and Chris, it's just been wonderful. Thank you for doing all this work, and I know this is a lot of work for you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We have a great time, so it's all worth it. We meet fantastic people such as you guys. So.
And thank you for introducing me to Mary Catherine. It was such a great pleasure to hear you read.
And Meredith too. Yes.
Yes, that's one of the perks of this whole thing. Is, we expand our family, our writing family here.
Yeah.
That's right. We absolutely love it. Thank you both so much. Thank you so much to our wonderful audience. Both of you have to go and check out all of the comments, all the love, and Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and it was just a lovely evening. And Chris, we'll be back next week with.
Oh, we sure will. We're going to be at Matt Dio and Tango Ice and Martin, one of whom will be our 250th reader.
Oh my goodness. That is so awesome, Chris.
Whoever that is gets a gift certificate from Target. I don't know.
Come on, a bookstore.
Right. The independent bookstore of your choice. That is so funny, Chris. All right. Thank you all once again. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Meredith Bergman and Mary Catherine Harper. We will see you all next week. Have a good night.
Yes, indeed.